Hi everyone, welcome here at the Green Tech for the next session of medicinal cannabis, market insights, challenges and opportunities. I'm Sonny Moonhardt from Cultivators and I will be your moderator for this session. Let's start with Timo Bongartz, right side of me. You're working for Fluence as Director EMEA region. So what do you do as Fluence?
We are a horticulture lighting company focused on all different crops, but we do a lot in cannabis.
Then going towards Nic Eastley from 3C Consulting, all the way from North America over here, but I hear that you're already quite for some time here in Holland. Is that correct?
We have, yeah. Been working in the United States for 15 years with legal, medical, and adult use cannabis, and then internationally about the last 7 years. So,
going to medicinal cannabis facilities, we have our third speaker, expert Bradley Nattrass from Urban-gro. So, what do you guys do?
Thanks, Sonny. Thanks for having me today. Urban-gro is a collection of just over 60 architects, engineers, cultivation designers, horticulturists, plant scientists that work hand in hand with our clients to design and also integrate equipment into high-performance cultivation facilities. We've worked on over 450 facilities in the last 8 years and are excited this year to be stepping over into the food-focused vertical farming segment as well.
I think we have a really nice team of experts over here on the table. So Timo, how do you look at the European medicinal cannabis market at this moment?
First of all, I think it's a market which is still a little bit at its infancy. Right now, I think market reports say it's $500 million right now, and it has a growth rate of over 30% for the next 5 years. But it clearly has momentum, and we don't see that not only in the growth rate, but also how the market is professionalizing. We are seeing along the value chain that more and more companies are establishing, and these companies are startups, but also established companies. Yeah. And I think this is a good indication to see that it's professionalizing, it's growing, which makes it very exciting, and that's why we have also American colleagues here, because I think it's an interesting market to look at and to get involved in.
And how do you see that, Nick? Because markets are opening up here in Europe. Is it going step by step, or is it going sky high already, or how do you look at it?
I absolutely agree. Very nascent industry where it's been slow. It's compartmentalized just like the United States, where it's not legal in America, but it's legal state by state, and each state comes with their own policies. International medical cannabis is based on UN laws under compassionate use. So countries see a need to alleviate suffering there, and then they come up with a program. Now, some of those programs are not necessarily great or viable for businesses. Always the main goal, alleviating patient suffering. But where that supply is going to come from, that's always the question. Everyone wants to be the next Canada, but it's like based on cost, vectors, the license size, what that potential market is, and if doctors are going to make prescriptions.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned a really good point. You have medicinal licensing for cultivation, but also for the use of medicinal cannabis. And that differs per country. We have countries where we have, you can cultivate, but the use is still illegal. So Europe is in that sense also a bit difficult, because country by country, they are implementing the laws and regulations. Going toward North America, Bradley, you're involved quite heavily with your company in the cannabis field. How do you look at the developments over there, and actually what lessons can we learn from the developments over there in America, and how should we implement them here in Europe?
I look at the European cannabis market really as where the US was 5 or 6 years ago. But the pioneers, the groups that are in first, are helping set the path for the rest. Lesson-wise, it's all about the environment. I'd highly recommend, don't cut any corners when it comes to the design of the facility. Make sure you're partnered with experts. And it really sort of lends into the second important point or lesson. Being first to market really matters. Price of cannabis in a new market for the first entrance is the highest.
You mentioned pricing. Is pricing going down in North America, in Canada, for example?
Well, as Nick alluded to, it varies by state, and it varies by time of year. It varies, for example, in Colorado, with how the outdoor crops, how the yields have come in.
In the United States, we can't take cannabis grown in Colorado to Illinois or to California, even if we have a massive supply deficit. And internationally, it's different. Once you're part of this program, if you allow import-exports, if it's at the same GXP standards of like GACP, GMP, or EU GMP, then you can, as long as you have all those certificates of analysis. So internationally, there's more room and flexibility for those supply shortages, but prices even internationally, like in Germany, have come down well over half a gram, like half the cost per gram in the last year and a half alone, based on more supply.
What do you think, Timo, in the long term, as you can also grow cannabis in tropical climates, in areas where you have already originally 12 hours daylight? Can we compete in Europe with countries around the equator, for example?
If you just look on the production cost, no. But then if you look in Europe, a tomato grown in Spain is also much cheaper than a tomato grown in the Netherlands. And still, the Netherlands is one of the biggest exporter of tomatoes. And why is that? Because they have a good business model. And so I think if we just compare production costs, no, but it's not about that. It depends on your business model, your route to market, if you have any value proposition in the way of cultivating, and as well how you deliver your product. If you have, yes, you can compete. And we also see that regulators, for example, here in the Netherlands, close the market. So there are 10 licensees, and they provide the product to the coffee shops here. I think it depends on, is there enough supply? Because we are talking about medical cannabis for patients, so there is also a requirement to fulfill this demand, and you need to also fulfill this demand from a quality aspect. And here right now, yes, there is growth in Colombia, there are growth in South America, South Africa, and so on, but they need to follow the GXP, GACP, and GMP rules.
Looking into quality, Bradley, how can technology, engineering, and the cultivation setup help growers to become efficient and delivering that high quality specs which is necessary for patients exactly?
Well, technology is the future of horticulture, not just the future of cannabis. Looking around the trade show floor, all these manufacturers are exhibiting systems that are very different to those systems that they had on display 2 years ago. So their engineers are focused on making their systems better and better. Look at Fluence, for example. The third generation has already been launched, and I'm sure they have dozens of engineers working on the future generations. But the future of technology is ag tech. It's the data. And there's 2 steps to this data. Today, there's a lot of listening going on. There's sensors being placed throughout cultivation facilities, sometimes every 1 square meter. And these sensors are turning back temperature, humidity, airflow, moisture level in substrate as well.
So, USA, Nic, there are a lot of states already legalized for many years. What are strong assets from the USA that we really should use here in Europe to also create a floral cannabis industry over here?
Yeah, great question. I mean, one unique thing about America, everything we do is federally illegal. So that means like the FDA, USDA, EPA, OSHA, like all these federal organizations, they can't tell cannabis companies what to do. The states get to figure that out. So we're not violating international drug policy as a country, but the states are violating federal, kind of gray area there. What that's allowed us to do on our medical cannabis and adult use cannabis industry is really taking API, like active pharmaceutical ingredients, and creating unique products, vaporizers, standardized beverages, edibles, transdermal patches, all the way down to infused adult lubricants with cannabis, which are extremely efficacious. But international medical cannabis, you have bulk API, flour or oil, and those products are compounded in a pharmacy. So in the United States, I would look at, the United States this year will probably hit 35 billion in revenue for cannabis sales. Canada, about 3 billion. International cannabis, about a little less than $1 billion. So we're making all the revenue in the US. What do consumers like? What sorts of varieties? How to produce this less expensively? And actually pull from like floriculture, like big shows, like all the vendors that come to Green Tech, we're flower. Yeah. And the cannabis industry, we used to grow outdoors and in greenhouses, but then it was illegal, so we went indoors only to hide, and that's where that technology and skill set evolved. But then now like stepping back into the light and pulling from traditional agriculture and floriculture, instead of trying to create a floriculture industry, that's like Dutch companies, Turkish companies, Chinese companies that have done this for 50 to 100 plus years, like that ag tech technology, that was what set us apart 5-6 years ago in our big greenhouses.
You already touched on the flower market, but Timo, is there a trend here in Europe that we actually also looking more and more into extracts? It's something done already in certain levels in the world, but how do you see that in Europe?
Today it's definitely a flower market. That we need to be very clear. If you see the statistics, it clearly indicates it's a flower market, but it is developing more into extracts and also pharmaceutical graded products, dronabinol and other Sentivex and so on. So what we are seeing, you know, as said earlier, so a doctor needs to prescribe it. You need to go to a pharmacy and get your product. So to prescribe flower is challenging. And if you see, especially in Europe, how flower is consumed with tobacco, it is a little bit absurd the way this product is consumed as a medicine. So to take all this into account, to answer your question, yes, we will see it goes more into extracts, but also we see more devices to consume maybe also flower, because then it becomes more clear how much you consume and so on. You can regulate it and not smoke it in a joint.
How do you look at that, Nic? If you look to quality and consistency, what is the top state in USA?
Again, each state creates their own laws. Like Georgia, the state of Georgia, 12 million people, they give out 6 licenses. And then some will be greenhouse, some will be indoor. Other states like Oklahoma, they give a license to pretty much anyone. There's 9,000 licenses for 3 million people. But then how many times are there actually inspections happening? And then when a state Department of Agriculture is coming up with their own standards for QA/QC, they have no idea what they're doing when it comes to regulating pyrolysis or like those sorts of products that are burned. So you'll see like one state say you can have this pesticide, others that can't. And that's why the United States, especially for a $35 billion market this year, we really need federal guidance to tell states what to do, but their hands are tied. But that quality, you know, the states that have better climate, like when you look at Florida, even though it's a huge state, it's so humid, mostly these indoor places, huge costs of like electricity and air conditioning. Other states that have really good sun and good climate, greenhouses, we can build those for like a fifth of the cost. Some states don't even allow greenhouses. That's why you have to have a really good like environmentally controlled system.
Same as in Germany actually, where it was compulsory that the tree growers are growing indoor. So then light becomes a really important aspect, Timo. So that's why we have you on the table. How important is light to get a really consistent yield and quality?
Yeah, so as you said, it's a plant. It needs to do photosynthesis, and it needs to, in this particular case, develop special chemical compounds. To get to this point, it's important to grow year-round, consistently, the product. And to do that, you need lighting, because you need to, if it's in a greenhouse, you need to supplement the weak winter months, but not only by lighting, you need more temperature, you need more CO2 and so on. So you need to create an environment which is repeatable throughout the year, throughout the batches, to have a final product which is delivering every time more or less the same to ensure patient safety. And for that, lighting is required in a greenhouse, but also indoors. And that makes it exciting, to be honest, because also what we are seeing, there are different strains, there are different reactions of the plant to lighting, and that's why it's very important to have the knowledge and not just to grow cannabis and everyone can enjoy it. It is really that you need to keep the patient safety in mind, and that's why growing consistently is important.
If we take that view about quality with light, what we have seen in Canada, Nic, with the big market explosion over there with multinationals, actually at this moment, some of them are closing a lot of facilities. How do you look at that?
Well, if you know me, you know I make fun of Canada a lot, not just because I'm an American, but mostly because I'm jealous that they legalized medical cannabis as a country first. And then also they legalized adult use as a country, the first G8. Uruguay was first, but that was Uruguay. And it was one of those moments like, is the IMF and World Bank going to destroy them? No, and they didn't. So Canada was first to market, which allowed public markets for capital, which, having done $1.5 billion of capital in the US, compared to like the hundreds of billions they've done there, it was based on them thinking we're first, kind of like you said, being first is important, but they thought we're going to produce all of this cannabis in Canada and made massive facilities. It's cold as hell there 6 months a year. It's expensive. Their taxes pretty much suck. And there's only, 40 million people there. So that's why they're doing 3 billion, we're doing 35, and we've barely even begun. So what happened is Aurora, Canopy, Tilray, they all went on this international market proliferation of just getting all these positions that weren't actually producing revenues. That's what killed their stocks, and that's why we've actually bought a few of their greenhouses, taken them apart for pennies on the dollar, and reconstructed them in America. We paid more in taxes actually to import them from Canada than we even purchased them for. And there's still about 800 licenses in Canada to build more facilities just to make more cannabis for a market that already has a massive oversupply.
So, other question, how do we prevent this here in Europe? I think that is an important question.
Main thing, like, know who your partners are, know what the value, like, do good financial modeling. How much is it going to cost, like, to buy your property, build your facility, have, different contingencies? What's the actual market? Not just we're going to grow cannabis and make billions of dollars. What's your target market? And if you're international, it's going to be much slower than you think. But if you do it slow and standardized and consistent, that's going to show your investors, and that's going to show like that future proliferation. But don't think you're going to take over the world from a cold place. Like, where do we grow coffee, mangoes, tomatoes? Once Colombia, Portugal, these other places do it those standards, that's when, like in Colombia, we're producing a gram for 7 euro cents at like GMP levels, which that's just not even possible in Europe.
But we will do over here in Europe. So we are building facilities, we are going to cultivate. Question for you, Bradley. Greenhouses, indoor facilities, how do you look at that? Because there are often a lot of talks, we should grow indoor, we should grow in a greenhouse. How do you look at that?
So Urban-gro focuses on indoor facilities, both the vertical farming and indoor cannabis facilities. But regardless of greenhouse or indoor, process flow is the key. How do the plants and the people and the products interact with each other inside the facility? And taking the time to really sit down and cultivate space plan early in order to think through what you want the facility to do once it starts up, how you want it, 1 or 2 expansions in the future, then bring it back to today to maximize space usage. That's the key.
Growing in greenhouses, I think with Fluence you also supplied a lot of greenhouses. How do you look at that, growing in a greenhouse for the medicinal market?
Absolutely possible. It's all around, it's all about process and procedures. Mm-hmm. As you all said correctly, do you have the SOPs in place? Do you have the people, the knowledge to follow these SOPs, to document properly and ensure that you follow the good agricultural practices along until the end, and have everything in place, also the systems to support it.
Looking to the European countries, what are the countries to watch today and tomorrow? So, for example, 2022, which countries you're focusing on?
Okay, I have, of course, a good view on the cultivation aspect of the business, right? The market is much more than the cultivation. But talking purely about cultivation, for us, it's interesting to look into Portugal, but also Switzerland. It's a big CBD market with a long tradition. They grow for a long time already, a lot of knowledge, opening up for THC experiments. Yep. We see, I'm also responsible as general manager for Middle East and Africa, so I have a good view also to Israel and South Africa, which are developing fast. And I think coming back to Europe, Denmark, but also in the Mediterranean area now, let's see how fast Greece is developing. We see North Macedonia. You know, a lot of initiatives we need to really, at the end, the proof is in the pudding, at the end we need to see. But right now, Portugal, Denmark, let's see, Netherlands. So there's a lot of things going on, which makes it exciting. But every country is different. Regulation different, yes. Customers different, way of growing different. That is exciting. Yeah.
Last remark for you, Nic. Which country should we watch in terms of cultivation here in Europe?
Portugal decriminalized drugs and did an amazing thing for drug policy in their population. When they legalized medical cannabis, Portugal has the best, most amicable climate, least amount of corruption and BS that you have to deal with. And there's a few regions in Portugal, just the lighting quality, I've grown some of the highest quality cannabis in my life, and we've grown in 21 countries now. So I think Portugal, on a medical standpoint, will be the lowest cost of production, highest quality in a combination of greenhouse, outdoor, and future indoor. And then in the Netherlands, the weed experiment, where like those 10 licenses to produce for the coffee houses, that's going to produce standardized flower and standardized brands, where you're not just guessing what the quality is.
I think that will definitely open up for other countries here in Europe, and we all have to see how that will develop with the coffee shop experiment.
It's an experiment.
It's an experiment, and it's only for 4 years, but I definitely think it will be extended, and ultimately it will be legalized all over Europe, I'm pretty sure. I think one of the key aspects on the table today was consistent yield and quality, and ensuring also safe and sound ingredients for the patients, especially medicinal cannabis. It's all about the patient. So I really want to thank you all here on the table for your contribution, and thanks again.